Hello, my friends. Welcome back. My name is Justice Knight, today filling in for Lisa Haven. We have a very important broadcast to bring you. President Trump has 7 days remaining on the clock to make one of his most monumental decisions to date. Before we get there, and if you haven't joined us yet, where I have the honor of co-hosting with Lisa at restrictedrepublic.com, we certainly hope you will join us over there. Right now, there is 2 specials. Use discount code SAVE10 at checkout and get $10 off our annual subscription, or we'll give you the first month for $1. Simply use the discount code $dollar at checkout. Now, on to our broadcast. You've seen the articles. You know what's coming up. Trump to meet with GOP lawmakers amid fight over curtailing U.S. spying powers. The surveillance state that 9/11 threw us directly into. Well, that legislation is coming up for renewal after a very brief extension. This started, as all of you know, as the USA Patriot Act of 2001. It turned into what was later and now called USA Freedom Act of 2015. This legislation is and was set to expire in December of last year, December 15th. The Democrats extended it for 3 months, bringing the renewal date to March 15th, 1 week from today. So many maneuvers throughout the life cycle of this horrible Orwellian surveillance Patriot Act renewal sneaks through Congress with Democratic support. November 20th of 2019. The extension, they weren't the first one to renew it. Obama signs NSA bill renewing Patriot Act powers, but again, he wasn't the first one. Bush kicked off modern mass surveillance. Obama expanded it. And now the real question, will Trump extend it? Or will he end it? And I'm hoping and praying he does. So for those of you, just as a very quick review, Patriot Act to Freedom Act and FISA. And how the 3 are related. You have to understand that to understand the importance of this argument. As it is stated here in Comparatech, to give a very brief history, FISA was enacted in 1978 before the proliferation of the internet and governed both the physical and electronic surveillance of primarily foreign powers and agents. The Patriot Act, enacted shortly after September 11, 2001, was essentially an amendment to FISA, which some declare they are completely sole and separate. I declare they are not completely sole and separate, that expanded surveillance to individuals not directly linked to terrorist groups. Many of the most controversial parts of the Patriot Act, particularly those dealing with the bulk surveillance, expired in 2015, but were renewed in the subsequent Freedom Act, which is now up for renewal in 1 week. Judge Andrew Napolitano published on Fox News, Patriot Act sections are weapons of totalitarian mass surveillance. Repeal them. Repeal them. That must be a resounding statement amongst anybody who cares about for our Constitution and our freedoms.
In 1928, Justice Brandeis wrote that there is more to life than owning material goods. There is the fulfillment of spiritual, intellectual, and cultural goals, and the achievement of intimate aspirations, none of which are any of the government's business.
What an amazing and incredible thought. None of those are the government's business. Does your teens know that? Do your kids know that? Do your grandkids know that? Most don't. They think that the government has control of a lot of this, that they're actually responsible for things that they were never meant to be responsible for.
Section 215 is set to expire in less than a month. So will Congress be brave enough to leave this unconstitutional boondoggle in the ash heap of history?
I could not have said that any better, and it's why I wanted him to say it for himself. Section 215, which is about to expire, is a fatal to freedom, as is Section 505. It permits, and don't worry, we're going to get to those sections, it permits designated federal judges to issue general warrants based on the writs of assistance standard of governmental need. One of those judges signed a search warrant for the telephone records of all Verizon customers in the United States. At the time, 115 million people. I want everybody to understand the scope of the surveillance arm and how this has gone terribly, terribly wrong for the American public. Both 215 and 505 are weapons of mass surveillance and should be repealed. They are instruments of a totalitarian government, not of free people. They defy the Constitution. They presume that our rights are not natural, but come from a government that can take them back. Mass surveillance produces a state that's known more about us than we do about it. And we've learned that. Broadcast, news article after news article. Carter Page, FISA warrant, continue to go. Just the spying on the Trump campaign alone. So much of this could never have been possible without this atrocious Patriot, aka Freedom Act. But I digress, and we have to move forward into this broadcast. There is so much information, the Patriot Act. And let's go into the key controversies of it very quickly. Section 203. Information for criminal probes to be shared with intelligence agency. The pros are, supporters say the provisions have greatly enhanced sharing within the FBI and the intelligence community as a whole, and we see how well that's gone. We've seen how they've taken and usurped all authority because of that act. The con, critics warn that unrestricted sharing could lead to the development of massive databases about citizens who are not even targets of criminal investigations. Think about that statement. Everything they're collecting on us has already created massive databases. We've seen breaches of it everywhere, even when we haven't signed over our information. And that's the problem. They're listening on your phones, they're watching on your social media, and nobody is doing anything about it. Roving wiretaps allows one wiretap authorization to cover multiple devices, even if not listed in the initial paperwork. The government says roving wiretaps are needed to deal with technologically sophisticated terrorists. The con, critics say the language of the act could lead to privacy violations of anyone who comes in casual contact with a suspect. It doesn't matter if you were in casual contact or not. They took Verizon, the entire log of all Verizon calls, and plugged it in because of this act. This is irrelevant in some ways, the pros and cons. Section 215, one of the more important sections, allows easier access to business records and foreign intelligence investigations. The provision, the pros, allow the investigators to obtain books, records, papers, documents, and others sought in connection with a terrorist investigation. The con, critics attack the breadth of the provision, saying the law could be used to demand the reading records of library or bookstore patrons. Anybody they so suspect for any reason, now that we've made our government too big, can be folded into an investigation that they have nothing to do with. Nothing to do with. That's the problem with this entire Freedom Patriot Act. To start, we're going to skip over foreign intelligence. We're going to go to Section 505, National Security Letters, expands the FBI's authority. We've seen how well the FBI's done with all the investigations lately, haven't we? A type of administration subpoena that does not require judicial approval. Think about that statement with everything we've learned. Strzok and Page in the investigations, and Carter Page and Papadopoulos. General Michael Flynn, let's continue to go and see the abuses that this is all tied into. The pro-supporters say the expanded use of national security letters allows the FBI to cast a much wider net to generate leads. We're going to talk about those leads in a second, about potential terrorist plots and to pursue them. Critics say, the cons, these subpoenas can be used to demand the private records of people who are not suspected terrorists, aka a presidential candidate, or spies. And they note the FBI does not need a judge's permission to take these requests. A presidential candidate. That's all I'm going to say on that one. So we wonder why so many rights groups are coming out. Human Rights Watch. U.S. End Bulk Data Collection Program. Congress should pass surveillance reform bill. That's one part of it, the FISA reform bill. Same group. Group urges Congress to oppose U.S.-UK cloud because we're going to put more information and now we're going to exchange it overseas. We can't secure our own data here at home, but we think we're going to secure it on an overseas transaction. The National Coalition Against Censorship, NCAC, urges passage of Patriot Act reforms. Change it. I don't want it reformed. I want it shredded up. Engadget. And this is the important part here. So this huge surveillance arm, and you would expect that some information came out of all this mass surveillance they've done, that they've shredded our Constitution for some fruits of their labor. The $100 million U.S. phone surveillance program produced, are you ready for this? 2 leads. 2 leads. That's all. That's what your freedom was worth to the U.S. government. 2 leads. It's disgusting. But the Congress postponed the vote to extend the Patriot Act surveillance programs. Democrats feared new amendments would derail the bill. We need this to go through, and wait till you see the desperate measures they took to make sure it went through. We'll go a step forward. Republicans hate surveillance on Trump, but sound like they'll renew the Patriot Act. Now, this is what I call misinformation in some ways. Judiciary Republicans gave FBI Director Christopher Wray the business over the Trump-Russia probe, but they stopped short of committing to jump expiring parts of the Patriot Act. That would concern many people who read that. On the surface, you need to understand that the Republicans are actually breaking down the door of Trump. The ones who matter, the ones who care, the ones who actually want to protect us, although that is becoming a minute few, to make sure that he either amends, changes, or destroys the legislation. This is a monumental decision for our president, the biggest of his entire presidency, in my humble opinion. But that lacks, the article goes on to state, if trust ends where the Patriot Act begins. The committee's ranking Republican. Now, I want to put this in perspective for you. This shocked me. Doug Collins said we must reauthorize the expiring Patriot provisions, even as Collins was a rare Republican who contextualized the 1978 FISA Act as congressional response to the intelligence agency's unconstitutional surveillance of peaceful protesters and others. Doug Collins, who I've defended on many occasions, now turns against us on the Patriot Act. I have a problem with that, Doug. If you care about us, you don't reauthorize this for 2 valid leads. 2. The only way you'd reauthorize this is to make sure you could continue to collect information on those who may later become an enemy or an inconvenience, and that's the reality of what this is all about. Donald Trump contradicts Bill Barr by demanding reforms to FISA legislation, saying they spied on my campaign. As Congress splits on renewing controversial surveillance powers, the only one who this is controversial to is those within the Senate, the Congress, the House of Representatives, and the executive offices. That's the only one this is controversial to. To you and I, the American public, this isn't controversial at all. We'll make it very black and white. 2 leads. Your privacy. Everybody's rights stripped and shredded away. Listening in whenever they want. This isn't controversial except in the fact that it still exists. I get fired up about this stuff. So bad and so deplorable and so disgusting are these people. The Intercept coronavirus spending bill could be used to cement spying powers. Surveillance critics in Congress warned they were actually, and there's people on record saying that they were going to tie. If you want the release of funding to help on coronavirus, you need to renew this Patriot Act for us. That's a disgusting government. That is a disgusting, unhinged government out of control. Let's listen to Jim Jordan for a moment.
But it's also serious when you have a secret court spy on a fellow American citizen, and the basis for them spying on it was lies given to the court by the FBI. That is we're talking about a U.S. citizen here. We're talking about 4 American citizens who were part of a presidential campaign who were spied on by the FBI. As I said before, I doubt if that's ever happened.
Has happened, unfortunately, Jim, but it should never happen. But you see again the intermingling of FISA, Freedom Act, and Patriot Act. They'd like you to think that these are 3 separate parts. They truly would like you to believe that. Don't believe the hype. Because the Freedom and Patriot Act weaponized FISA. It weaponized it as a tool of great surveillance, totalitarian government to spy on the American people, the President of the United States, and everybody surrounding him, because they've proven that those were fraudulent. But does that really make a difference to anybody within this government at this point in time? So Trump to meet with GOP lawmakers. There is a ray of hope there. There is some rays of hope amid fight over curtailing U.S. spy powers. This is back to the original article we started on. The president has said that his position is we should not reauthorize the Patriot Act without reforms. In my opinion, not far enough. But thankfully, it's something. This came from Rand Paul, who said he would know more about how far Mr. Trump intended to push his position after the Tuesday meeting. Mr. Trump has signaled his support for a measure that would prohibit the U.S. government from turning, and what did they do again? Spun it back to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to get wiretaps on Americans. And Mr. Paul said last week he is crafting an amendment to a coming intelligence bill that would overhaul the secretive court. This is my concern. This is where I speak to our president. And I ask him the FISA court is not enough. That's a great starting point. Anything forward at this point would make all the difference in the world. But Mr. President, this is the most important decision of your presidency. You want to see America support you even larger than they do now. Overturn the Freedom Act, the Patriot Act, rehash the FISA courts. Make it so that it protects the American people. This is the most monumental decision you will make of your presidency. We, the people of this great republic, demand change. This needs to change. And you have 1 week to make the right decision. Now you see why Lisa had me cover this. My passion overflows when it comes to this topic. And I know it was a long broadcast. It needs to be. You need to understand all the ins and outs and the idiosyncrasies, and you need to protect yourself. Lisa asked me to close with Virtual Shield, one of her greatest sponsors, now offering 30% off. HideWithLisa.com. And most importantly, once again, if you have the opportunity to join us over at Restricted Republic, it would mean the world to us because there is information overflowing there. Overabundant. The catalog is full. We work diligently day and night to provide you all the materials you need to make the decisions that are most important right now when our great republic is under an attack like no other. My name is Justice Knight. Thank you so much. Godspeed and God bless. Until next time, signing out.